Emotional content is filmed on Whadjuk Noongar land. This podcast acknowledges the traditional owners and custodians of country. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Come for the stories, stay for the connection. I'm your host, Amy Jane Brand, and this is your weekly dose of emotional content. Hello, my loves, and welcome back to this week's episode of Emotional Content. I hope you are all doing well. As you can probably tell from the title, today we are discussing relationship red flags. And if you've listened to my past episodes, you will know that I have got my fair share of experience within relationships. I've kind of jumped in and out of long-term relationships since I started dating. So I think I am in a place where I can give my advice and opinions on this subject. So this week I thought, why not gather all of my red flags, experiences, mistakes, all into one episode, so you can learn best from my fuck-ups. However, in saying that, I do believe that we all need to learn from our own mistakes. I guess you would say you have to touch the stove to learn that it's hot. And that's pretty much the same with everything in life, especially when it comes to relationships. The red flags I'm listing today consist of some obvious ones and some not so obvious ones. The subtle red flags that tend to fly over our heads, especially when we're in the thick of it, we're in the honeymoon phase. Once you're attached and locked in, you're feeling comfortable, a sense of belonging and safety. You don't really want to risk losing what you've got. So you tend to just let things go that you wouldn't if you were looking at it in hindsight. So if you're keen for some more raw, honest and vulnerable stories, then this episode is definitely for you. Remember, this podcast is always a judgment-free zone, so be kind, no judging. It's mistakes that I have made that can hopefully help you make better decisions than me. Please don't forget, if you have any stories that you potentially want me to unpack on the podcast, you can send them via my website at emotionalcontent.com.au, or you can send me a DM and we can chat from there. So without further ado, let's get straight into the episode. First up, we have an obvious one, which is love bombing. Love bombing is one that I got peppered with in my previous relationship. At that point in my life, I was really keen for somebody to love me properly. I had gone through my fair share of shitty relationships. I was just getting out of a relationship with someone who was an alcoholic, which was very difficult to deal with. Anyone that's dealt with a partner who's addicted to any sort of substance will know how complicated, traumatic, difficult, painful that can be. So by that point in my life, I would say I was very susceptible to the love bombing and was quite happy with the idea of that real love story fantasy that was being played out for me. At the time, I didn't see it for what it was. I was dating people that didn't really even have a romantic bone in their body. So yeah, to receive what felt like something special was really nice for me at the time, but things quickly changed after that. Once I was, I guess you would call, in that person's trap. They had planned things out really strategically, and that's when things started to fade from there. I didn't see it for what it was at all at the time. I just genuinely thought I was being loved how I deserved to be loved, which is really sad to say, especially if you're dating someone really manipulative or narcissistic. Not that I like to throw that word around, but if you are dating someone with those kind of tendencies, then they use it to their advantage. And if you're in a place where you're susceptible or vulnerable or really just looking to be loved right and haven't experienced love bombing before, then it's pretty easy to fall into that trap, which I did. It would never work on me now. Not that my partner, Frank, and I would be breaking up, but if there ever was that situation in the future, I would see it for what it was straight away. So I guess if you have been victim to love bombing before, I don't want you to feel any shame about it. There's people that haven't been love bombed before, and I've heard them get online and be like, oh, I would never fall for it, blah, blah, blah. But like, until you're in that position yourself, or you've gone through a lot of hardship prior in your life, you can't really say that you would or wouldn't get drawn into it. I think when you're older and more mature, then yes, potentially you would see it without the experience. However, if you're younger like me, had a pretty shit run prior to that, yeah, you're probably going to fall into that trap. So when you see people say, oh, I'd never fall for love bombing, and you have, please don't feel any shame about it, because I fell for it. And yeah, I don't beat myself up for that, because I was just in a place in my life where I really wanted to be loved, and I don't think anyone should feel embarrassed for that fact. But if you don't know what love bombing is, to put it simply, it's when they just shower you with affection, love, often gifts as well, which wasn't something that was really drawing into me. It was more the love letters and things like that, the real sentimental stuff that seems genuine at the time. But then once they have you in their trap, they pull all of that back and then start treating you how they naturally wanted to be treating you, which is like shit. So it's just a real influx of romance, and then it gets pulled away. I definitely don't think that is just a male thing either. It doesn't matter what way you swing, what your preference is. Love bombing is gender neutral. It can be anyone that does that. Not everyone is going to agree with me on this, but it's something that I heard explained recently, and I have to agree with it. It's all about the love at first sight theory. I do think that love at first sight can be a bit of a red flag when people say that. Attraction at first sight is probably more accurate, because I think love develops over time, and to really truly love somebody for who they are, you need to learn who they are before you can fully wholeheartedly love someone. So I think you can have a real instant click and attraction with them physically, emotionally, getting into conversation with them very much. So with Frank, it felt like that as well. It was very quick and fast. But the older that I get, the more I realize it just takes so much more to truly love somebody for who they are. And that takes time. You have to go through hardship with somebody. You have to love them in all their phases, all their seasons. I think the love at first sight idea can actually trap people into situations that they probably should have walked away from. I just think it's something that was fed to us by Disney. It's just a bit of a fantasy with that, because you can think somebody's the one and then it just turns to shit within a year, or you go through hardship and realize they never really had your back, or, you know, there's fundamental morals or things that you don't or do believe in, you're very opposite on that, even down to politics, religion. Those things are pretty fundamental for a lot of people as well. And if you're not gelling in those areas, then yeah, I think it takes a lot more than the initial attraction to truly love somebody. Not that that's a red flag, but I think it can be, in a sense, that love at first sight almost entraps you into that idea that you have to stay with that person. Coming from experience in my last relationship, constantly posting that things were a lot better than they actually were behind closed doors, that sense of, oh, I've invested a lot of years into this, oh, we've painted this really pretty picture, when it's not been anything close to that. It did have a sense of like being locked into something that I didn't want to be in anymore because of that narrative, because of that story. You can have connection at first sight, attraction at first sight, you can have deep conversation at first meeting, but love at first sight is pushing the line between fantasy and reality, I think. Okay, next up I have written here, not fighting in relationship is not a good thing. So this is a bit of a controversial hot take, but I will explain why. Obviously, if you're not having a whole bunch of conflict all the time and you're able to navigate through things that come up in a healthy manner, that's awesome. But if you are not disagreeing, you're not arguing, you're not, I guess, fighting on basically anything within the relationship, I would have to say that your relationship is sitting at a surface level. Because if you're really peeling back the onion, going through all different layers of both of you as people, there's things that are going to come up that you don't agree with, because you should not be agreeing on everything. If you're agreeing on everything, it's kind of giving doesn't want to rock the boat. Like you're just kind of agreeing with each other so that everything stays quite neutral and picture perfect. And I don't believe that a good relationship grows in that way. I think you need to navigate conflict in a healthy way, or learn to. If you've both been quite explosive in the past, learning to navigate in a healthy way moving forward in this relationship is a really good thing to grow in for each other. And you have to go through the waves. If you're just constantly agreeing and having surface level conversation, it's not really going to benefit either person in that relationship. I feel like when people aren't arguing, or whenever they've said to me, oh, we never argue, you're essentially hiding parts of yourself to appear perfect or appear extremely compatible, and you're just ignoring the very real conversations that need to be had. You want to be vulnerable with each other. You want to show all sides of yourself, the parts that you're ashamed of, the parts that you're embarrassed of, the parts that you think nobody will love you for, are the parts that you need to open up about so you can both have safety within the relationship, grow, connect. The disagreements are important. And when you navigate conflict together in a healthy way, it is the most pinnacle way to grow a stronger bond together. And you continue to grow that muscle of navigating conflict together, because life happens and you're going to have hardship within your relationship. If you want to get married, or if you are married, then you need to grow that healthy conflict muscle so that you can navigate things that come up in the future. Because if you don't do that, oh God, it's like surface level conversations all the time, and that would be a really unfulfilling relationship for me. I would absolutely hate to have that. I've always been a natural oversharer. I know that that's not default for men, especially. It takes them a lot more to talk usually, but I've always been an oversharer. And I think it's been really difficult for me in the past because I've been with people that have not been willing to open up those sides of themselves. So it's felt very one-sided. If you're like me and you've been doing that for a long time and they're still just so unwilling to give you anything in return to really be vulnerable and open up, then it's definitely time to reassess that relationship, because growth only happens when you both open up and you both navigate conflict. You have disagreements, you look into what you both fundamentally believe in or don't believe in, and that's where you continue to grow. So that's a very long red flag answer there. Next is the obvious one to that. Fighting too much is another red flag. So obviously there needs to be a healthy balance between the two. I think most people will be aware of what unhealthy fighting is when it becomes verbally abusive, physically abusive, name calling. The passive-aggressive silent treatment as well. Silent treatment is actually emotional abuse. It's a manipulation tactic again. It's a big red flag. Of course, they can take some time away in a healthy manner to create some space, regulate nervous systems. That's completely different. But if someone is giving you the silent treatment, refuses to speak to you days later, trying to punish you in a sense rather than talking things out, which puts you through anxiety, basically an emotional hellhole, it's abusive. That's emotionally abusive. I want people to know that. I've had that happen to me many, many times. I myself am very much a talker. I like to talk things out, clear the air and move on. But when I have been given the silent treatment for days on end, it sends me insane. And I hate it, and I don't think anyone should put up with that shit. Also, if someone is doing that to you, let them know that what they are doing is emotionally abusive. Maybe it will make them think twice. They get defensive very easily. Now, this one is usually tinkering towards the side of guilty for something. Constantly on the defense can come from a few different things. This one's difficult because it can stem from a place of like childhood bullying or trauma. But if it gets to a point where they literally cannot take accountability for anything, I think that's when it gets into the red flag zone. If they get really aggressive, always defensive, always just snapping back, and never come to some sort of agreement or accountability or apologize for something that they have clearly done wrong, then for me, that's definitely a red flag. If they are defensive when you ask them questions about like what they're doing on their phone or where they've been or things like that, when your gut is immediately like, this motherfucker is lying, it's a red flag. And it makes it really difficult to trust them. I have been on the receiving end of that for years and years. And even though I knew in my gut that they were lying, I think that invested so much time into the relationship, that bullshit narrative is one of the things that kind of kept me in it still. And I think getting defensive easily over everything and not taking any accountability is also a marker for them not being very mature as well, which isn't ideal. Next up is gaslighting. Oh my God. Gaslighting is something that drives me quite literally insane. If somebody was trying to get at me, gaslighting me is probably the biggest trigger of mine, which I probably shouldn't be putting on the internet, but that's the truth. When somebody is telling me that something didn't happen and I actually know that it did, or they're just lying completely when I know the actual fact of what happened, making me question my own reality is the biggest trigger for me because I dealt with it for 6 years. I was gaslit for 6 years straight, and the amount of distance that created between us was huge. And the distrust that comes with that is massive. As soon as somebody gaslights me about something, even little white innocent lies, that stuff really gets to me. It makes me question everything. It makes me just overthink everything. Then I start wondering what else they're lying about. It's just not a good situation for me mentally. And within relationship, the gaslighting stuff, it's total manipulation. Questioning your own reality when you're in a relationship is fucking awful. It's something to look out for. To give an example of like the most common one is when I just had an argument with one of my exes, and the next day we go to talk about it, and then they lie about all of the things that they had actually done or said within that argument, which then makes me question myself and the reality of what actually happened to get themselves out of the situation. So rather than taking accountability, being like, oh yeah, I did say that, or yes, I did do that, or yeah, I did text this person inappropriately and then they deleted it and they're telling you it never happened. Like that shit is so manipulative when in actual fact you would so prefer someone to just tell you the truth. Even if it fucking hurts so much, to be faced with the truth and that person take accountability is so much better. That actually gives you the space to navigate through it and grow, or to step away. Like you're given a choice when you're given the truth. When you are given the truth about what's actually happened during conflicts, during an argument, given the truth and them taking accountability gives you the option to work through it or to step away. When they manipulate the situation, don't take accountability and make you question yourself, you often stay in the relationship or the situation because you're not fully sure if you're making the right choice or not, because they're making you question yourself. And that is the manipulation behind gaslighting. And unfortunately, we get stuck in those kind of situations quite often. And if you're anything like me, you want to see the best in that person. So you often get stuck from there and you're just constantly looking for the truth. Like myself, I was constantly looking for the truth, so I had a solid bit of evidence as to why I could walk away. But in the end, I never needed the evidence. I just needed to trust my own gut. And that's essentially what happened when I ended things. I never really got full confirmation on a lot of stuff that happened, but I just had to trust my gut and know that it wasn't for me anymore. So yeah, gaslighting, a big one, probably one of my biggest personal ones, but that's a giant red flag for me. Next is refusal to take accountability. I have basically already covered that one, and it's pretty self-explanatory. If they're unable to take accountability for the part that they play, then massive red flag. Grow the fuck up. Get some maturity under your belt and move the fuck on. Maturity under their belt, not yours, and you should leave, is basically what I'm saying. Next, we have controlling behaviour. Controlling what you post, what you wear, basically what you say when you're out. Controlling behaviour is something I experienced massively within that DV relationship. That was pretty terrifying if I didn't do what I was told. So in that situation, that came up for me from the get-go. I initially thought that the controlling behaviour was because they loved me and wanted what was best for me, and it was the polar opposite. I haven't really had my fair share of controlling behaviour in other relationships. It did kind of come up a tiny bit in my first long-term relationship when I wanted to start doing Zoo Weekly magazines and that type of modelling. It was basically a no for them, and it was part of the reason why I had to walk away from that relationship, because I wasn't going to give up my dreams for anyone, and rightly so. But that's the only other time I've really experienced that. Controlling behaviour in my previous relationship was done on a different level, more manipulatively and with career stuff rather than what I wore or what I posted. I mean, that was free reign. I was posting whatever the fuck I wanted. but it can come up on a lot of different levels. It can be little subtle comments about what you're eating and your weight. Controlling behavior can show up in all areas of your relationship. So it's definitely one to keep an eye out for. If you're early into the relationship and you're noticing any controlling behavior, whether it's subtle or obvious, you should try and make a boundary around that pretty quickly and navigate where the fuck that's coming from as soon as possible, because you don't want to be in a relationship years down the line and they're basically controlling every aspect of your life. Next up, we have jealousy. It's healthy to have a little bit of it, but not let it control the whole relationship. And that goes for both of you, talking to you and your partner here. My last relationship, I actually had a complete lack of jealousy from my partner. I had jealousy because I was constantly triggered that he was being an untrustworthy dog. So I constantly felt like I was on guard, and I had every reason to feel like that. So my gut was constantly telling me something was wrong when it was, and I was kind of bypassing it, listening to the lies and continuing to stay in something that I shouldn't have, basically. But I think it's very obvious when someone is too jealous and it becomes controlling. That one I don't think needs too much explaining. However, I have been in a position where there wasn't enough of it, and I was kind of craving that element of, oh, you should give a shit if I walked away or somebody else wanted me. That was lacking completely, and it made me feel really disposable. It wasn't like a freeing, mutual respect kind of feeling. It was a lack of even giving a shit about who I was with, what I was doing, which was definitely a red flag. What I'm about to tell you, think about it from your perspective. If you were me, you would expect your partner to get jealous about this. But keep in mind, my ex would always put his work above anything else, and that was also including me. Basically, back in America, we were all out clubbing. We had a booth, bottle service, the whole lot. We were out with the Chainsmokers crew, and one of the guys out of the Chainsmokers, I'm just not going to say which one because there's no point, but one of the boys decided to motorboat me, and we were all really drunk and was dancing on me pretty heavily, right? So you can get the picture. And instead of even flinching, my ex was just laughing about it and just kind of letting it carry on, which to me was really sad. Like, I actually felt quite sad about it afterwards, because to me that's inappropriate. I don't know, somebody like Frank, for instance, would not be happy about that. Whether it was his boss or not, it didn't matter who the fuck it was. Nobody else would be motorboating me and it be acceptable. And I was upset that my ex didn't give a shit. That was leaning more towards the end of the relationship, and it was a huge red flag for me. I really thought that that's something that he would at least split up and be like, yo, come on, that's enough. But no. Just stood there, stone cold sober, by the way. So completely in his right mind, totally aware of what was going on, and fully just let that happen. Probably because it was his boss and it was always about them being his bosses. So he just let them do whatever and would bend over and take it no matter what they did. So my hot take, there needs to be a small element of jealousy there. Otherwise, big fat fucking red flag. Next up, your partner chooses their friends over you. I have experienced this frequently before, and it was so fucking painful. Obviously, it depends on the context. There needs to be space for friendships and the relationships separately as well. However, if you're in a situation like me, when I was younger, you guys know I owned a house with my first long-term boyfriend. What you don't probably know, I think I might have touched on it before, but I will go into it again, is the way that I had some arguments with his friends and they would be let into the house the next day when I did not want them in the house. I owned financially that house almost outright, my half of it. So technically I had more of a say in who was allowed in and out of that house. Not that I ever leveraged that, but in my mind, it felt like an even bigger insult. I felt like I didn't have much of a say when it came to his friends. They were allowed to just rock up whenever they fucking wanted. To me, that's just such an element of disrespect. Me not feeling comfortable in my own home because they're being let in the door when I don't want them there is just, I would never put up with it now. Let me tell you that. I would never put up with that now. And I would never put my partner through that. Also, when it came to that house and that relationship, I remember, this is going way back, like a very long time. But when I ended things and I had moved out of that house, even though still owned it, he was just living in it and I was back at my mum's, I went back there for a party that was being hosted at the house, and a whole bunch of these girls that I wasn't close with anymore were all just like in my old master bedroom, kind of looking me up and down as to like, what am I doing here? It was so fucking weird. I honestly wanted to turn around and be like, you bitches know that I own this house more than he does, and you're looking me up and down as to why I'm here. The absolute disrespect out of them was diabolical. I remember leaving the house with a few of my friends and completely wrote myself off that night. If you're familiar with the Perth clubbing scene, I went out to Capital and I had a massive night. Because I was just so upset with the level of disrespect. So yeah, I've had my fair share of the priority being the friends or the friend group over me, and it's not a good feeling. If you're in that situation, I personally think it's a massive red flag. If they prioritize their friends over you, over your wishes, over your feelings, and honestly, I think it's a maturity thing as well. When it's all about the boys, it's like, fucking pick which one you want. Do you want to be single with the boys, or do you want to be in a mature relationship? I don't have time for that shit. Next up, we have pulling you away from your own family and friends. This is something that happened to me in my DV relationship. Again, huge controlling tactic. Pulling you away from the people you care about the most, the ones that love you the most, is a dangerous situation to be in. If you feel yourself pulling away from your usual circle of people that love you, that is a red flag. There's no doubt about it. Obviously, when you first get into a relationship and it's the honeymoon period and you're just so intertwined with each other, probably fucking each other's brains out, then that's completely different. You will notice the difference between really pulling away from your own family and your closest ones. Isolating yourself on any capacity is a red flag, whether it's yourself choosing to isolate from them because you're trying to keep them away from this toxic relationship, not letting them know how bad it is, or whether they are making it so you just can't see people. Both are red flags. If you feel yourself pulling away from the ones that love you the most, start asking yourself why that's happening and get really honest with yourself as quickly as possible, because nobody should be doing that. I was pulled away from my friends and family. I also left my job in the end. I stopped talking to people that loved me the most. He even started talking to those people for me in text messages and replied to them on my behalf. So without getting into that too much, I have definitely been in the thick of that, and it was really fucking scary. I spent the whole time in that relationship lying about how bad it was to protect people that loved me from knowing the truth, and I was scared that something would happen to them. So that can happen far quicker than you realize, and it's really good to see the signs early before it gets really dark. Next, we have they judge you for your sexual history. This is another really big controlling sense of behaviour that I do not condone. This is a massive red flag. Men, women, however they identify, if somebody is acting like you are just not allowed to have any sort of sexual history, or they're pissed off that you've been with someone that they don't like, it's none of their damn business. They cannot judge you for having a history, especially if they've got their own history as well. If you've hooked up with somebody that they don't like, that's a them problem. It's not on you. You shouldn't feel guilty for that. And I just hate that kind of behavior because it's just so stupid, especially when you live in a place like Los Angeles, for instance. You hear a lot of people say that it is so much smaller than you think. Everyone knows everyone. And absolutely everybody knew everyone over there. And it's the same here with Perth. Perth can feel like a country town sometimes with how much people know each other. So it's pretty impossible to get around that one. Yeah, the body count thing shouldn't really be an issue. It is about you both in the moment of your relationship and moving forward from there. And that very much goes into the Madonna whore complex. So the Madonna whore complex, to put it simply, is when they either look at you as like wifey material, innocent, they look at you as pure. And then when they hear that you have any sort of sexual history with anybody else, then you're looked at as a slut, you've lost your worth. It is where they either put you on a pedestal or make you feel like trash. Remember the Madonna whore complex because it is a real one. If somebody gets funny about you having a sexual history, fucking red flag. Not into that at all. Grow the fuck up. Oh, you just don't want to be dealing with that, okay? Next, we have they talk badly about their exes. Red fucking flag. I have experienced this and I got sucked into it, which is so shameful to say. I hate that I ever believed it, but my ex slagged off anyone that he had been with so much. They're crazy, they're this, they're that, refusing to even take a tiny bit of accountability for the role that he played in the relationships. It was just uncomfortable. Every time I had to listen to it, I was thinking, this is just fucking weird. How can every other person be crazy or insane or, just trash talking them completely and taking no accountability? I feel like when I've talked about past relationships, I've always been very honest about the role that I played because it takes two to tango for sure. I think when you hear them talking shit about their exes constantly, slagging them off, using the crazy word, that is a huge red flag. However, if they talk about their exes with respect, not name calling, not using abusive language, taking responsibility for things that they had done, that's a big green flag. If you can tell they're being really honest about how things played out, green flag. If they are slagging them off, taking no accountability, massive red flag. I would not even bother getting involved with them because they haven't got the maturity yet. They haven't had enough self-development to realize that they were at fault as well, or they were probably the ones in the wrong in the first place. Let's be fucking honest here. I think this also goes into not accepting you for who you are. When you get into a relationship with somebody and they're constantly trying to change you or they are attached to the idea of somebody you could be, it's a massive red flag. You do not want to get into a relationship where the goal is to change your partner. You want to be loved for every side of yourself, for who you are, and encouraged to grow. Yes, there needs to be compromise in relationships and growth, but to fundamentally change someone for who they are, for the things they like, is going to be painful for you, wanting that change, and also extremely painful for them. It's going to cause a lot of conflict, especially when it goes into things like drugs and alcohol. If you can see that that person is so much better away from that, but they are in the thick of their addiction, you're going to be putting yourself through a lot of pain because until they are ready to change that, they're not going to do it. So just keep that in mind. If someone is trying to change you, the things you like, what you wear, how you speak, what you do, they don't love you for you. They love the idea of you. And I have 100% fallen into that trap myself. So they've either wanted to change me or I have wanted things to change about them, and it was never going to work. When they put other people down for their looks. Now, I have been with people that do that, and it's caused a lot of arguments, especially when I've been with guys that have put other women down for how they look. Obviously, that's my heterosexual straight relationship experience. But when I've been with dudes and they've hung shit off of what a girl looks like that they've been with, especially as well, I personally think that's a huge red flag. One of the things I loved so much about getting together with Frank is when he said to me that he can see beauty in every person, no matter who they are. I just melted when he said that because I've never heard a guy speak that way, and it was just so refreshing to hear another human say that out loud. He said it in a group setting, and I just thought it was such a powerful and beautiful statement to make. It's so true. There's beauty in everybody. But if you're getting with a dude and he starts tearing a woman down for what she looks like, or other guys, it doesn't matter who it is, another human being, that just gives me a huge ick. Yeah, huge red flag for me, that one. Next up, we have putting a partner on a pedestal. This one I haven't experienced much myself. It's been more something that I've seen other people I care about go through. So I wanted to highlight this one in case there's any girls listening that have been going through this. But when a guy has been super good looking conventionally, I have found that my friends have kind of put them on a pedestal and never felt good enough to be with that person. This is all going off of physicality, nothing to do with who the person is or what they're like on the inside. They have never felt fully secure because they think that they're punching. And I personally feel like that's a red flag because it should be a level playing field regardless of what anybody looks like. Putting yourself down or feeling like you're lucky to be chosen by them is a total power imbalance that will never lead to anything good in the end. If that's the way that you're feeling, it can also stem down to them not making you feel secure, and they know that there's a power imbalance in that way, so it essentially gets used against you by manipulative, shitty people. So I want you to know that nobody is better than you. No one should be put on a pedestal, and it is all a level playing field regardless of what anybody looks like. And if somebody makes you feel like you are below them, 100% a red flag as well. So I don't think anyone should be put on a pedestal within a relationship. Next up, walking on eggshells. Now, walking on eggshells stems from a lot of different things, but if you're spending most of your time monitoring your partner's emotions or reactions to things in order to keep the peace, it's a huge red flag. If you are tiptoeing around them to make sure you don't piss them off, upset them, trying to avoid any explosive reactions, then this feels like a level of emotional abuse. It's not a situation you want to be in. I know that a lot of people my age have watched mothers be like that around fathers, constantly monitoring what they're like and adjusting to avoid any situations come up. I've seen that myself growing up as well. Constantly having to judge the situation essentially puts you in a state of fight or flight most of the time. So it's really bad for your cortisol levels. It's extremely bad for your stress. Your hair can start falling out. It's not good for anyone on the receiving end of that. You do not want to be constantly walking on eggshells or feeling like you have to constantly monitor their emotions. Obviously, if things come up that can cause that temporarily, it's different. But if it's a constant state of walking on eggshells, that is a huge red flag, and it can lead to further signs of abuse within the relationship. Another red flag is when they are completely emotionally unavailable, but you are expected to be open. Now, this is a huge power tactic. Narcissists love using this. My DV relationship loved using this. And like I said before, I am a massive oversharer, so it was something that was used against me frequently. Obviously, it's my choice whether I want to overshare with things, but I guess I naturally just want to get into the less surface level stuff and really get to know people. So it's been used against me quite frequently in relationships. And unfortunately, when you do open up parts of yourself thinking that it's safe and then it gets used against you, it can be really traumatic. It's emotionally abusive. It's really upsetting for somebody like myself as well, who loves to trust and be open with people. So yeah, it's been used against me time and time again, even in friendships as well. It's something to be really careful of. If someone is expecting you to be really open but giving you nothing, if you can figure that one out quite quickly, it will save yourself a lot of heartache. That is a top one on my red flag list. Another red flag of mine, which I'm putting into this list, is when they say something nasty and then follow up with, "I'm just being honest." Now, honesty is always the best policy. You know me, I love vulnerability. I love being honest about things and getting into the nitty-gritty of it. But if someone says something cruel or nasty, especially your partner, and then says, "Oh, I'm just being honest," afterwards, that's being nasty. That's not being honest. That's being cruel. And if you are having to be honest about something that could feel really critical or mean, you need to follow it up with the right aftercare. So if they actually care about you and need to tell you something that could hurt your feelings, they need to care about your feelings afterwards and help you navigate that information while you're processing it, right? I'll give you an example that I thought I would never say on the internet, because I never forgot this. Unfortunately, I have to use him as an example again because he really was the piece of shit that taught me the most. But when we first got together and we hung out at a hotel, this is so bad. Basically, he picked me up, threw me on the bed, and immediately said to me, "Wow, you're actually a lot lighter than you look." And I never fucking forgot that. "You are a lot lighter than you look." Yeah, what a compliment. Obviously, I got very upset with that, and it got followed up with, "I'm just being honest." So that is probably the best personal example I can give you of that happening to me. I died inside. I well and truly shriveled up into a ball and wanted the ground to swallow me whole. The I'm just being honest card is fucking bullshit. Red flag. Okay, I've got a few more here, but I'm going to do 2 more. Otherwise, we're going forever. But I have so many red flags. It's not funny. The next one I'm going to say is when you're not satisfied with the intimacy. I think this one is really obvious, but we tend to put up with things over time because we like other elements of the relationship. However, from my personal experience, as many of you will know from listening to previous episodes, I had a fairly shit sex life until I met Frank. So the guys I dated previously really didn't give much of a shit of my pleasure. It was all about them. What I'm saying is it's a red flag if you're leaving it long term, not speaking up for your own pleasure, not advocating for the things that you want. Personally, I think in relationship, you should be striving for success in all areas. I think the most beneficial area to have success in is communication because it helps you in these situations where you're not happy with the intimacy or you want more attention on you so you can get there or more effort. If you can communicate in a healthy way and navigate things like this with open, kind, honest and vulnerable communication, then your relationship is going to do well and probably stand the test of time. I think success in all areas of the relationship also requires a lot of time and attention with intimacy as well. As you know, there's a big spike in intimacy in the honeymoon phase and then it dips down and it's something that you have to make more effort on, especially as the years carry on. So if you're not happy with the intimacy in your relationship, it is a red flag. It's an elephant in the room that you do need to address. But if you are fundamentally just not compatible in that area, I think it's something to probably reassess as well. So yeah, red flag on the intimacy, something that definitely needs to be addressed as soon as possible. One I have to say that is on my list is when they are lovely towards you, but they are horrible to wait staff or service workers. This is self-explanatory. It is a red flag that needs to go. Like they are gone, put them in the bin. Absolutely not. This is a really obvious one, but I think that some people do let this slide. So I had to put this one in here. Okay, so one important thing that I wanted to go over with this red flag episode is something that I never hear people talk about. And I think it's really, really important, especially if you're in a long-term relationship or you're getting into a relationship with somebody that is struggling with their mental health. There needs to be a level of understanding. Some of these red flags that I have listed will show up in good people that are currently going through a rough patch in their life. They could be going through a really difficult season in their life where they're working through childhood trauma or they've just been hit with some really deep grief. Life happens, right? So many different things can happen and it can throw us into some really dark mental holes. And we often tend to lash out on the ones that are closest to us. However, there is a difference between being with somebody who's going through a really tough season in their life and you're helping them navigate that or you're supporting them compared to someone that is just consistently treating you like shit. There's some key differences in what's okay, in my opinion, and what isn't okay. Everybody's level of what feels okay for them will be different and that's completely fine. But I did just want to highlight that if you're with somebody that's going through a really difficult season in their life and they're getting external help from a professional, they are aware that there's some things that they need to work on. They take accountability, they apologize, they're working through it. You can see that they are putting in the work to better themselves for themselves. That's a very different situation compared to being with someone that is just consistently showing up in a poor manner, treating you badly, doesn't think they have a problem, doesn't get any help externally, never has seen a therapist before, wouldn't dream of it. There's a big difference between the two. But we do tend to hurt the ones that we love sometimes with poor behavior. So red flags can show up momentarily. It's whether it continues consistently for a long period of time and they take no accountability for it. However, if you're with someone that is going through a rough patch right now and you know they're a good person underneath and you know they're working on it, it's very different. I just wanted to put that in here because I think the whole red flag thing can get a little bit hyped up sometimes. And if someone makes some mistakes here and there or are showing up badly because there's something deeper going on under the surface, you'll know if they're a good person or not. And you'll know what's acceptable and unacceptable over time. As I said, everybody's different, and what you're willing to work through with somebody is very different as well. But I think mental health plays a massive role in how we show up within relationships. So it's worth highlighting that when we're going through a rough patch, some of this shit will show up. It's part of being human, but it's about whether they are doing the aftercare, apologizing, navigating through it with you, and trying to be better that makes the difference. Okay, well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I have tried to highlight some red flags that can feel not as obvious when you're in the relationship. I find that a lot of this stuff went over my head. I made a lot of excuses for poor behavior, and I didn't see it for what it was until I had left those situations. Please remember, I don't want you guys to feel any sort of shame. If you've experienced any of this, if you're going through it right now, when you get out of these shitty relationships, it gives you the wisdom to know what you do and don't want for the next one. It's all part of being in relationships. And I just know that if you haven't found your person yet, they are definitely out there. You just need to remember that you are deserving of a healthy and reciprocated love. I love you guys so much. I'm sending you all a massive hug, and thank you so much for listening to my red flags. Have an amazing day, and I will see you in next week's episode. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please give it a share. You never know who might need a little emotional content in their life. For daily feel-good posts, follow @_emotional content on Instagram and TikTok. And don't forget to hit that follow button so you're notified every time a new episode drops. Your support means the absolute world to me.